and the estate of Ayn Rand. And I was sitting there thinking, if you have the nerve to call Robertson Davies, Robbie, you're a better man than I am, think what she was doing. But what was most unnerving was that my manuscript was sitting on the desk in front of him in the huge orange box in which I'd sent it. And I was sure that at some point he was going to say, well, now that I've read the whole thing, it's just too weird, there's nothing I can do with it, but keep me in mind. So I was expecting to hear this. Instead, he said, the thing about Freddie Forsyth and Robbie Davies and those guys is that they're all great storytellers. He laid a hand on the box and smiled at me and said, and you're another one. Well, at this point I was so gratified I didn't care what he did with it, but I did gather enough wits to ask, and he said, well, I'm sending it out today to 5 editors who I think might like it, and he ran down the list for me and told me all about them and what he thought their chances were and all that. And I said, well, that's great. How long do you think we might have to wait for an answer? Because I'd been reading Writer's Market, which says anything like 18 months, 2 years, and all that. And he said, oh, I've told them I want an answer in 30 days. I'm thinking, well, you picked the right agent. So I said, great, and went home to wait for 30 days. Well, 4 days later, I get a message on my answering machine. It says, this is Perry. I've just called to update you about your manuscript. And I said, well, of the 5 he sent it to, at least one has said, here, I'm not reading a 10-pound book, take it back. And so I called up expecting to hear that. And instead, he said, well, of the 5 I sent it to, so far 3 of them have called with offers to buy it. So he was able to negotiate amongst them for 2 weeks, emerged with a 3-book contract, and bing, I was a novelist. Well, I gather that a lot of you actually have read Echo in the Bone already, or are about to, but we have roughly 3 minutes left before question and answer time. I wondered if you would like to hear a small excerpt from Echo in the Bone. Then you can say you have actually been to a literary event if we had a reading, not just lunch. Okay. Well, this comes from fairly early in the book, and it does not contain any plot spoilers for those of you who have not read the book. It's hard to find those in this book. There's a lot of plot. But anyway, this takes place still in North Carolina. We left Jamie and Claire at the end of A Breath of Snow and Ashes with him declaring that they're going to Scotland to get his printing press back. Well, they can't leave until the mountain passes melt because they're full of snow. It's just too hard to travel. So they're waiting for the spring. Well, now spring has sprung and the water is flowing, and Clara is gathering fresh watercress from the creek because it's been a long, hard winter with no greenery, and she's dying for salad. Well, while she's doing this, she hears screeching and yelling coming from farther up the creek, and going to investigate, she discovers the gentlemen of the household having their spring bath. So she pauses to enjoy the spectacle for a while, and then sees Jamie get out and wrap himself in his plaid and head up the hill. So she goes to leave her basket of watercress and follows him. I waved briefly and turned up the side trail that led to the upper clearing. New house, everyone called it, though the only indications that there might someday be a house there were a stack of felled logs and a number of pegs driven into the ground with strings tied between them. These were meant to mark the placement and dimensions of the house Jamie intended to build in replacement of the big house when we came back. He'd been moving the pegs, I saw. The wide front room was now wider, and the back room intended for my surgery had developed a growth of some sort, perhaps a separate still room. The architect was sitting on a log surveying his kingdom, stark naked. Expecting me, were you? I asked, taking off my shawl and hanging it on a convenient branch. I was. He smiled and scratched his chest. I thought the sight of my naked backside would likely inflame you. Or was it maybe Bobby's? Bobby hasn't got one. Do you know you haven't got a single gray hair below the neck? Why is that, I wonder? He glanced down, inspecting himself, but it was true. There were only a few strands of silver among the fiery mass of his hair, though his beard, the winter growth tediously and painfully removed a few days before, was heavily frosted with white. But the hair on his chest was still a dark auburn, and that below a fluffy mass of vivid ginger. He combed his fingers thoughtfully through the exuberant foliage, looking down. I think it's hiding, he remarked, and glanced up at me, one eyebrow raised. Want to come and help me hunt for it? I came round in front of him and obligingly knelt down. The object in question was in fact quite visible, though admittedly looking rather shell-shocked by the recent immersion, and a most interesting shade of pale blue. Well, I said after a moment's contemplation, great oaks from tiny acorns grow. A shiver ran through him at the warmth of my mouth, and I lifted my hands involuntarily, cradling his balls. Holy God, he said, and his hands rested lightly on my head in benediction. What did you say? He asked a moment later. I said, coming up momentarily for air, I find the goose flesh rather erotic. There's more where that came from, he assured me. Take your shift off, Sassenach. I haven't seen you naked in nearly 6 months. Well, no, you haven't, I agreed, hesitating. I'm not sure I want you to. One eyebrow went up. Why ever not? because I've been indoors for weeks on end without sun or exercise to speak of. I probably look like one of those grubs you find under rocks, fat, white, and squidgy. Squidgy, he repeated, breaking into a grin. Squidgy, I said with dignity, wrapping my arms round myself. He pursed his lips and exhaled slowly, eyeing me with his head on one side. I like it when you're fat, but I can quite well that you're not, he said, because I felt your ribs when I put my arms about you each night since the end of January. As for white, you've been white all the time I've known you. It's not likely to come a great shock to me. As for the squidgy part, he extended one hand and wiggled the fingers beckoningly at me. I think I might enjoy that. I said, still hesitant. He sighed. Sasunak, he said. I said, I haven't seen you naked in 6 months. That means if you take your shift off now, you'll be the best thing I've seen in 6 months. And at my age, I didn't think I remember farther back than that. I laughed and without further ado stood up and pulled the ribbon tie at the neck of my shift. Wriggling, I let it fall in a puddle around my feet. He closed his eyes, then breathed deep and opened them again. I'm blinded, he said softly, and held out a hand to me. Blinded, as in sun bouncing off a vast expanse of snow, I asked dubiously, or as in coming face to face with a gorgon. Seeing a gorgon turns you to stone, that strikes you blind, he informed me. Though come to think, he prodded himself with an experimental forefinger. I may turn to stone yet. Will you come here, for God's sake? I came. As I understand it, we have 15 minutes for questions and answers. If any of you have any questions you would like to ask, yeah.
Regarding any movies or anything,
Right.
I know that there was some thought of doing something on HBO. How much freedom license would you let them do that? Like the whole Charlene Harris's novels were turned into something else, and I know that there would probably be a burning at HBO if they did that with Outlander or any of the others. Can you tell us what's going on with that?
Well, at the moment, the books are under an option with the production company called Essential Entertainment, who want to make a feature film, which would in turn be different, but it's not HBO. The principle, however, is the same, which is that unless you are J.K. Rowling, you have no control, absolutely. As my first agent said to me, if you care what they do to your book, don't sell it to them, because you have no control. What an option means is that a production company pays you a fairly modest amount of money for a period of time. For that period of time, 18 months, 2 years, whatever, they have the sole and exclusive right to try to raise $60 million to make a movie. If they succeed in raising that much financing, then they pay you a somewhat larger chunk of money, and at that point they own the film rights forever, in perpetuity, throughout the universe. I mean, their contract actually says that. You know, the first time I saw one, I said, they must be kidding, and my agent said, oh no, they're not kidding. They mean it. Yeah, they want everything forever. We did, in fact, since I have a good agent, and they did want the movie, we made quite a good contract by option standards, which says that if they make a movie, if they don't make a movie, if they buy the film rights, but they don't make a movie, I get the rights back in 7 years. If they make a movie of Outlander, but you know it isn't good enough that they want to make another one, I get the rights back in 7 years. If they make a movie of Outlander and it's a big hit, or you know enough of a hit that they want to make another, then the contract provides for the rest of the series, and they can go on. But if at any point they go 7 years without making a movie, then I get the rights back, which is very unusual. Yeah, so, yeah, in the back there. The next question, of course, is who would I cast to be Janie? If that's not your question, go ahead and ask.
I have a question about dates.
Yeah.
My daughter, Allison Clare,
Uh-huh.
was born on April 21st, the
Oh.
same day as Amanda Clare.
Oh, yeah.
So I was wondering
Cool.
how you pick dates for things that are not historical. Make
Oh,
them up.
I just make them up, yeah.